Great to see you all here. Good afternoon. Our good friend Dr. P.A. Fazal Ghafoor, President of the Muslim Education Society, Professor Lebba, Dr. Abu Bakr, Dr. Muhammad Bidu Zaman. I think my friend Muhammad Ali is not here yet. Mr. Ashraf Ali M.A., Mr. Faisal Kottikolon, Shabana Faisal, Dr. K.P. Hussain, whose book I'll be launching later this afternoon, Mr. Bashir, Mr. Ashraf Tamarasheri, who gets a lot of applause, I hear, in this audience. The chairman of the Global Alumni, Hisham Bashir, and the president of the UAE Alumni, Hashi Kalingal. Alumni, families, students, friends. I hope that covers everybody. Ellarikkum ende vinithamaya namaskaram. I am delighted to join you all. I must say, till this morning I wasn't sure if I could make it because I've been rather unwell with a rather bad respiratory infection. But fortified by lots of antibiotics, I'm with you today. I didn't want to let you down at the last minute. If occasionally I start interrupting my words with a swig of water or a cough, I'm sure you will excuse me. But the topic I was asked to address for all of you today, the topic of innovation in India, strikes me as a particularly appropriate one for the alumni of the MES College of Engineering. There is in many ways a lot of interest in exploring and understanding innovation across our country. That doesn't surprise me. It demonstrates our society's growing faith in our potential to solve traditional age-old problems that we continue to struggle with. For India is becoming increasingly an innovation-driven economy that looks towards both innovation and entrepreneurship as the path to the future, where answers are being found through fresh ideas and fresh thinking, driven by factors such as the availability of more funding, domestic and international, consolidation activities by a number of firms, the evolving technology space and a burgeoning demand for new products and services within the domestic market. Startups have permeated our landscape as Indians across the board have embraced innovation with enthusiasm and spirit, finding new ways of solving old problems. As engineering graduates, you all probably understand that these developments are taking place. You probably understand them better than most of us do, and you may well already, some of you, be actively involved in contributing to this changing reality. Now, we all know the tradition of Indian innovation is not a new one. Indians abroad have already proved themselves in a number of startups. They have helmed, I think, 40% of all the startups in Silicon Valley in California have an Indian in the startup team. I've jokingly referred to Bangalore as Silicon Plateau. In Bombay, there is a place called Powai Valley because of the number of startups located there. All of these startups are changing our outlook on the world, and it's striking that India has already emerged as the world's third largest startup ecosystem, which will be not less than 11,000 by 2020, according to projections. In any case, the last figure I saw, 2016, is already almost 5,000, so we're well on the way. Now, the options we have available to us are countless. I remember after my days in college, and I don't know, there are not too many people in this room of my vintage, how few were the options available to all of us graduating youngsters in the India of the 1960s or early 1970s. Even within the higher education system, today there are so many more subjects one can study. Courses are available that didn't exist in my college days. And far more kinds of jobs and career options are available to all of today's youth in India than we could have even dreamed of then. Our economy is still a very much closed, socialist, protectionist economy. International exposure was very limited. Going abroad was very rare. The term globalization hadn't even been coined. Today we are a very globalized economy. The world has become smaller. Operations of companies are straddling the world. And opportunities, of course, far greater for today's young people that were unknown, as I said, to my generation. Now, this transformation really began with the liberalization of 1991, when Dr. Manmohan Singh stood in Parliament and made his famous budget speech, in which he declared that no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. And that idea was that of opening up the Indian economy, giving us the growth and diversity through liberalization that has allowed us to weather many storms thereafter. When the global economy went into crisis after 2008, India stood firm. We were one of the very few major economies other than China where there was absolutely no quarter of negative growth, whereas there had been in every other major economy. We've now overtaken Japan to become the third largest economy in the world in purchasing power parity terms, PPP. And given the core strength of the Indian economy, in 2015, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, predicted that India would then be the fastest growing major economy in the world. Unfortunately, of course, our Prime Minister chose to inflict the folly of demonetization on us, which knocked us off that pedestal, and we remained second to China. But were it not for that momentary folly, it would seem to me that India is well on course to being and remaining the fastest growing major economy in the world. Now, I would argue in front of all these engineering college alumni that the best is yet to come, because you are on our side. When I say you, I mean the young alumni here in particular, because we are the youngest major economy in the world. At a time when many of our potential competitors in Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, are all aging and facing a serious demographic squeeze. Even Europe, the average age is going to be 46 by 2020. In Japan, it's going to be 47. Even in America, it's going to be 40. Whereas in India, in 2020, the average age will be 29. So we have this huge theoretical advantage of a young population, 50% under 25, 65% under 35. So the majority of India is already young. And a young country where fresh graduates will be joining a youthful, dynamic, competitive, productive workforce, which could be the engine of the world as China was for an entire generation. In fact, the International Labour Organization, ILO, a UN body in Geneva, predicted that by 2020 we will have in India 116 million workers in the job starting age group of 20 to 24 years of age, whereas China will only have 94 million. So theoretically, the numbers give us the labor force for the world, and as the labor force around the industrialized world shrinks by 4% by 2020, by China's labor force shrinks by 5%, India's will increase by 32%. So as far as age and structure of our demography is concerned, we have a major competitive advantage. But, as I've said a number of times, this demographic dividend will only work in our favor if we can educate and train our young people to seize the opportunities available to them in the 21st century world economy. If we can't do that, we can face a demographic disaster instead of a demographic dividend, because we may continue to produce legions of uneducated or undereducated, unemployed and unemployable young men, and that means very frustrated young men. I say this because many of you don't realize we've had Maoist or Naxalite incidents in 165 of the 707 districts in our country. 165 districts have been affected by Naxalite violence. And these are young men who, because they have no jobs, no education, or no prospects of getting jobs, feel they have no stake in our society, as we have not equipped them with what is needed to make a success of their lives. And the result, as you know, is that they are vulnerable to the blandishments of any misguided ideologue with 1,000 rupees and a Kalashnikov. This is why, when I was minister, I used to argue that education and training and skill development are not just socio-economic issues, they are a national security issue for our country. But this is where you all come in, because harnessing young India's potential and bringing about the economic and social transformation we all hope for will require highly educated and motivated individuals like yourselves, the MESC graduates. It's because of people like you that India's burgeoning entrepreneurial ambitions can be a weapon in our national arsenal as we march towards greater economic growth. While we celebrate those who've created a distinctive brand India by building phenomenal business empires, our chances have been strengthened by the fact that in recent years there's a proliferation of small, medium-level entrepreneurial ventures, even some micro-enterprises. Some will succeed, some will fail, but they will all energize our economic space because they are trying to do something new and innovative. We need to cultivate this habit, create an ecosystem of innovation, as the right mindset is often the battle won in finding the right solution. Now, in 70 years of independence, we have actually found a lot of solutions. I think it's too easy for us in India to bemoan the fact we are very good critics of our own country, but we don't often give ourselves credit for what we have accomplished in 70 years. The British left us with a growth rate of 0.01% over the preceding 5 decades. We have taken that up to world-beating levels. The British left us with a literacy rate of 17%, of which only women's literacy rate was only 8.8%. I think that's my good friend, Mr. Muhammad Ali. Please, welcome. Is only 8.8%. We have gone from there to a literacy rate of 79% overall and 69% for women. That gap is not something we should be proud of. I think you all know that in Kerala there is no such gap. Women are just as educated as men, but at the national level we have a challenge. And we had a life expectancy, as some of you who read my book, An Era of Darkness, will know, of just 27. That is, an Indian born in 1947 could expect to live to the age of 27. Today that has approached 70, the biblical 70. And 90% of Indians lived below the poverty line in the British days. Today it's about 20, just over 20%. That's still too many. But where we were in 1947 and where we are today is actually a story of success and not of failure. And you must understand, as you are all contemplating your future work as leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, that there are many things we have done in India that the rest of the world is waking up to and noticing. There are Harvard case studies on phenomena like the dabbawalas of Mumbai, who go off and collect tiffin from various households around the city. Lakhs of tiffin carriers are delivered with an astonishing accuracy rate that is statistically greater than a computer could have designed. And these dabbas are delivered without fail, have been for 50, 60 years, to the husbands of the ladies sending these dabbas while they have their lunch in their offices. Similarly, there's been studies of Sulabh International, studies of Indian Railways computerization. We have set some very interesting examples in recent years. Jugad is being talked about. I think since our compere spoke to you all in Hindi, I don't think I need to translate Jugad for you. But doing things often improvised, using whatever you've got to hand to meet a particular need, that's Jugad. And we do a lot of Jugad in India, and the rest of the world is waking up and seeing what this is. In fact, when I was invited in 2011 to Toronto University to inaugurate an India Innovation Center, imagine the rest of the world want to study Indian innovation, and the buzzword in those days was Indovation, for Indian innovation. And I devoted my speech at that time to Jugad. People think it's a way of shortcuts and getting around the system, cutting corners. For me, it's more than that. It's new ways of thinking beyond the conventional framework, repurposing things, making do with what we've got within our resource constraints, and above all, finding non-traditional solutions to the problems that you're dealing with. So an Indian villager will construct a makeshift vehicle to transport his livestock and goods by rigging a wooden bullock cart with an irrigation hand pump to serve as an engine and putting large tractor tires on. This becomes his vehicle. He doesn't have any roadworthiness certificate from the transport authority, but he's able to get his goods done. Common households and common machines and household objects are reincarnated in ways that their original manufacturers never intended. For example, I came across a lassi shop in Punjab. In Punjab in the hot summer, everyone drinks lassi. And what they'd done was they had rigged a washing machine to make lassi in industrial size quantities. So the spin cycle gave you nicely frothy lassi. And that was not something the washing machine manufacturer had ever contemplated. Everything is reusable or reimagined. All of you are from well-off families, I'm sure, but many will remember the days when mobile phones were first invented. Bills were slightly higher, families were a little poorer, and so we invented in India the concept of the missed call, right? So the son would call one ring to the father or mother, and they would know they have to call back so the call can come on their bill and not his. That is also an Indian Jugad, you see. So, but it's seriously, jokes apart, we have been able to come up with a number of world-beating innovations through this kind of imagination. The Tata Nano, for example. I know most of you today probably think of the Tata Nano as a failure. It was a marketing disaster. But when it was first invented and brought into the market, what a marvel it was. The car cost 1 lakh rupees, which is roughly the same as the price of a high-end DVD in a fancy car, except of course there's no DVD in the Nano and no radio either in the basic model. But its innovations gathered 34 patents. And these are not merely the results of doing away with frills, including power brakes, air conditioning, side view mirrors, all of which were eliminated, but rather by clever engineering skills, reducing the use of steel by inventing an aluminium engine, increasing space by moving the wheels to the edge of the chassis, relying on a modular design that enables the car to be assembled from kits. And all of this proved conclusively that you could do more with less. Another example many of you are probably aware of is our mission to Mars, Mangalyaan. It cost us 492 crores, which was less than the special effects budget of the Hollywood space movie Gravity. Now, the entire cost of the Indian Mars expedition was about 11% the cost of NASA's expedition. But what's more, India became the first country in the world to successfully put this satellite into orbit around Mars, a Mars orbiter, on the first attempt. Not even the US had done that. Not even the US had done that. Not the Europeans, both of which have successfully orbited, but not on the first attempt. And Japan and China, despite many attempts, have still not succeeded in putting an orbiter around Mars. We have done so. So these are the extraordinary things we can do. And coming down to small scale, there's the GE Mac 400, which is a handheld electrocardiogram device that costs about 50,000 rupees. The cheapest alternative costs much more than 1 lakh anywhere else. There's the Tata Swatch, which I think is a 1,500 rupee water purifier, and that's 10 times cheaper than any other water purifier on the market. Now, what do these innovations do? The GE Mac 400 uses just 4 buttons for the ECG, rather than the usual dozen. It has a tiny portable printer, like the printer that your waiter will bring you in a fancy restaurant in Dubai to print your credit card receipt. And it's therefore small enough to fit into a satchel or a knapsack and even to run on batteries. As a result, the cost of an ECG has come down to 50 rupees per patient, which makes it very affordable to poor Indians. In the past, no poor Indian could even afford an ECG for a checkup because it would have cost thousands of rupees. The Swatch purifier uses rice husks, which actually were one of our country's most common waste products after paddy harvesting. Those husks are purifying water. Now you think about it this way, given that some 5 million Indians are dying of cardiovascular diseases every year, and more than a quarter of them are under 65, about 2 million are dying every year from drinking contaminated water. That means these innovations are truly groundbreaking. And you must understand the value and the significance of finding solutions that actually respond to Indian needs. I was talking to the eminent Professor Mashelkar, who announced an annual award, an annual prize for innovation a couple of years ago. And the first year he gave the prize to a young man who solved a very interesting problem. You all know that eye examinations are essential, right? You all take them. In India, we have 15 million people who are blind, mainly for preventable reasons. If their eyes have been tested, glaucoma had been caught, or cataracts have been caught at an early stage, they would have been saved. But unfortunately, thank you. Unfortunately, many of them don't get tested. Why don't they get tested? Not because they can't afford it. The tests are not necessarily very expensive. They can even be free eye camps. But if you go get your eyes tested for glaucoma or cataracts, they put something to dilate the pupils, and that means you have blurry, fuzzy vision for the next 3 or 4 hours. Now, if you're a daily wage worker, that means you can't work that day. If you can't work that day, your family doesn't eat. So you don't get the eye test, because with that eye test, you're not able to see. And as a result, you carry on and eventually become blind when it could have been prevented much earlier. So what this fellow did, whom Dr. Mashelkar gave the prize to, was to come up with a way of testing eyes without creating this 4 hours of dilation. And as a result, Dr. Mashelkar said, I gave him the Innovation Award, not only for having thought of this, but have responded to a real need of the poorest of Indians. This, to my mind, is the kind of challenge you all need to set yourselves as engineering graduates. You need to find ways of solving these problems. I often say that whether we grow at 9% as we once did or 6% as we're apparently doing now, we can't afford to forget the 25% at the bottom of our society. That is where the real needs of the country are. Now, I can give you more examples as the Hepatitis B vaccine invented in India, which brought the price of one vaccine injection from 750 rupees down to about 15 rupees. Insulin's price has fallen by 40% thanks to a Bangalore biotech firm. There are various other examples, but I don't need to bore you with them. In fact, I can give you a totally different example for the restless kids in the room, and I'm wearing it because, I need glasses for distance, but not for proximity. And because of that, and because I don't like them and don't find them comfortable, I hardly wear glasses about 5% of the time. And that means the remaining 95% I don't need them, so I used to lose them, misplace them. I would put them down somewhere, forget them. I would leave them on a table, somebody would knock them down, they would break. Or if I'm sitting in Kerala and my politician's munda, there's no pockets in a munda, so it'd be resting on my lap. When I stand up, they'd fall and somebody would step on them. I remember in the first 3 months of 2013, I ended up breaking 6 pairs of glasses, breaking or losing. And I was complaining about this to a friend. He said, why is this problem? I said, very simple. I said, glasses are deeply inconvenient because they sit on the bridge of your nose, they hang over your ears. I find that very uncomfortable. It bothers me, and therefore I don't wear them most of the time. But when I don't wear them, I also lose them or break them. So he said, that's an interesting thing. So it's the way the glasses are designed that you don't like. I said, yeah, for 150 years, glasses have always been like this, and I never liked them. So he said, it doesn't have to be this way. And a few weeks later, he came back with what's now hanging around my neck. It's a very simple way of rethinking the pair of glasses. Why should it sit on your nose? Why does it have to hang over your ears? If it's hanging around your neck, it's there all the time. You can forget about it. You won't lose it. You won't break it. But when you need to use it, there you go. 2 magnets, click it together in the middle, and I can see the people at the back. And then I can unclick it again and carry on talking. So there's simply a way of out-of-the-box thinking, and we don't do that enough in our country. We need to encourage our children, right from school days, well before they get to MES, to ask not only why, but why not. To respectfully try and find out more than the teacher is offering you in teaching. You have to be able to explore, to think differently, not just do things because they've always been that way. We are, after all, the civilization that thousands of years ago invented the zero. But today it seems that all we invent is zero. Now, we are, of course, in a I've taken a bit too long. I'm going to try and wrap this up. But, the fact is that Globalization is a phenomenon of our age. We can't get away from that. It creates certain economic and social dislocations. Concerns of job security have been raised in many places, how the economic gains of globalization are distributed. And I always stress that in India, we've only been touched, only a thin layer of our society has still benefited from it. And one of the great strengths of the Congress approach to liberalization was, with liberalization, our economy will grow, but we should also be able to distribute the fruits of the revenues from that growth to those who are on the margins, those who are poor and deprived, those who have nothing. After all, the magic of the market will not appeal to those who cannot afford to enter the marketplace. So we need to give them a leg up, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to ensure that we actually reach out to and help those in need. And particularly given the stories in India that the assets of the top 1% of the population amount to something like 50% of the country's GDP. There's something wrong there, and the only way it can be addressed is by giving the others a chance to come up. I'm very impressed by the young people I meet. Engineering is a challenging profession. You all know we produce 500,000, 5 lakh engineers a year in India, and 62% of them end up in jobs that do not require an engineering degree. There is very often a real mismatch between the demands of the market and what our colleges are producing, which is why I would personally emphasize very strongly the need for much more cooperation between academia and industry, so that industry is able to tell academia what exactly it needs, and academia can train people to actually have skills that the job market requires. This is very, very important. And you know, many problems in our country haven't changed for decades. There's still parts of India where roti, kapda and makan are not guaranteed. Now in some places they've graduated to demanding bijli, sadak and pani, and perhaps in the next election they'll add to that basic human right 4G broadband. After all, for many 4G is more important than Modi ji. So we will have to try and find ways of giving everybody all of these essentials and solving them. But we can do so. We can do so because there is nothing that we can't do if we make the effort. I'm often reminded of the story of Jamshedji Tata, who was a great hero of mine. He was thrown out of the British-owned Watson's Hotel in Bombay in the 1890s. The story is there's a sign outside saying that Indians and dogs not allowed. So when he was thrown out of that hotel, not given admission, he said, all right, I'll build my own hotel. And he went ahead and built the Taj Mahal Hotel near the Gateway of India, which became one of the great hotels of the modern world. Whereas Watson's Hotel, which threw him out, no longer exists. They've shut down. I don't know whether the dogs are allowed in the Taj Mahal, but the Indians certainly are. And the point I'm trying to make is that with determination, we can do anything that others can also do. When Mr. Tata tried for many decades to get permission to start a modern steel mill in British India, he was denied at every stage by bureaucrats and officials in the British Empire. And finally he was able to get permission, but the first steel was produced after he died. When he finally got permission, the senior imperial official, the then chairman of the railway board, sneered that he would personally eat every ounce of steel that an Indian was capable of producing. I only regret that he didn't live long enough to see the descendants of the same Jamshedji Tata buy up the remnants of British steel when they bought Chorus in the last decade of the last century. Might have given him a bad case of indigestion. So anyway, there are all of these examples, and if you can't make them, you can buy them. I don't know how many of you saw that meme when the then re-elected Prime Minister David Cameron went to reclaim his mandate from the Queen of England in 2015. The meme went around Facebook and WhatsApp and so on, saying, look at the British Prime Minister going to the British Queen in an Indian car, because he was going in a Jaguar, escorted by police, and another Indian car, a Land Rover. As I said, if you can't make them, buy them and improve them, which is what the Indian company Tatas did. Now, the fact is that what's important now is to have that self-belief. There's nothing we can't do. There's nothing we can't do as well as anybody else. And at the same time, as you realize that you want to do things as innovators, remember to carry with you the weight on your shoulders of the countless faceless millions who need your creative energy, who need your success, so that they too can hope and dream of a better life for their own people. I was going to end there, but it's very odd, as you know, for an Indian politician these days to end a speech without quoting Mahatma Gandhi. So I should do that. Mahatma Gandhi actually once said, it's the quality of our work that will please God and not just the quantity. He also more famously declared, be the change you wish to see in the world. Since quality will not come without change, I think both his exhortations apply to all of you. Change yourselves to change the world, and do so with work and values of the highest quality. That, I think, is what the MES College of Engineering tries to stand for, and those are the very qualities that Mahatma Gandhi would applaud as you strive to create a better India for all of us. Nandi, Namaskaram, Jai Hind.
That was terrific. We have reached such heights of Jugad that we first do and then we contemplate. Right? It's like that. We no more contemplate and do. So here we have, we'd asked alumni to send us some questions so that we could ask Dr. Tharoor. Of the 733 questions that we received, we are only taking 3, right? Due to the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the first question, Dr. Tharoor, how would you compare your roles being an international diplomat and that of a member of parliament?
Really, there's no comparison, you know. I mean, politics is a very different world from almost any other profession. There's something uniquely challenging about the multiple demands and pressures on a politician. I'm referring particularly to an elected politician. If you've comfortably been parked in the Rajya Sabha, it's a different story. But if you are an elected politician, you are responsive every day to the demands of your voters and constituents. And that's literally 24/7. One of our former chief ministers, Oomen Chandy, was famous for answering the phone even at 2 a.m. to get one of his constituents out of jail. You have a tremendous amount of knowledge you're supposed to have about contemporary political developments, national issues, local issues, the wishes of your constituents and voters, the stands of other parties. You should be a very well-read person to keep on top of all of that, or at least have well-read people around you who will brief you very thoroughly, which some politicians end up doing. And you also have to be prepared for a fair amount of viciousness. When I first came into politics, I think my back was perforated by quite a few daggers, and some of them may have come from my own side. So there is no such thing in politics as being generous to a rival or a competitor or a peer. It is an absolutely dog-eat-dog world. And people around politicians also tend to get infected by that. And then finally, there's something challenging about the ethical environment in politics. I must say that for somebody who grew up in a family with a salaried father and a housewife mother, I had never known the amount of black money sloshing around in our system, the extent to which so much economic activity in the political world seems to have to take place with funds that are not accounted for and not covered by check. To me, it was still a shock when I came back to India to see how far this has gone. And there are therefore some of these moral challenges. How do you navigate a principled way through the system when the system itself seems so deeply compromised? So all of these things are very different from working at the United Nations. The United Nations is an organization with its own challenges, including the challenge of having 192 masters, member states. But at the same time, precisely because you have so many bosses, you have a lot more flexibility to maneuver forward, a lot more room for your individual talent and ability, and a work culture that usually tends to derive from the most modern of practices around the world. So much easier work environment. And coming to India has involved a number of challenges which I must say has been an education as well. But I don't think that one or the other can be compared. They're very different worlds.
The next question that we have is, what is that one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Well, what I'd give to the younger people here is a very simple piece of advice. Be yourself. First of all, find out what that yourself is. Every one of you has some talent. You may not have developed it sufficiently, but look inwards, you'll find it. It may not be necessarily that you'll come first in class, or that you'll win the 100-yard dash, or you'll dance so energetically on the stage as some of the kids did earlier, or that you will necessarily sing the best songs at the annual festival, whatever it may be. There may be simply a talent to make your neighbor laugh. It may be a talent to give consolation to somebody in distress. Every one of you has a talent. Find out what you're capable of, challenge yourself to fulfill that capability, and at the same time, don't ever stop trying. You have to be able to know how much you can do. And there's no shame in saying at the end of the day, I tried, but I couldn't do it. I might try again, I might try 6, 7 times and not be able to do it, and I finally may realize I can't do it. But the fact is, there is great shame in saying I never tried. You have to make that effort, stretch yourself, challenge yourself. And the final word would be, remember that nobody can be a better you than you yourself. Your identity is yours. What you're capable of, what you can achieve, is up to you. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody else can beat you at it. Be the best you that you can be.
You were talking a lot about Jugad during your speech. In spite of we being so Jugaders, okay, we have so much of Jugad in our country, but still we haven't been able to come up with that international brand that everybody could look forward to. We haven't seen a lot of international brands come out of India and make it at a world stage. What do you think could be the reason for that?
That's a good question, because if we're going to judge by international yardsticks, then we have to measure what we do by international audiences and markets. And so there are Indian products like Indian tea, for example, are hugely popular, but not one particular brand as such, largely because others beat us to tea. Jugad itself, if you like, is a branded Indian quality, but it's not a product. What can we make that others need? And I must say that I'm expecting some smart young Indian innovator to find the answer to that. Hungary had never had an invention, and then Rubik came up with the Rubik's Cube. And that became a worldwide brand, right? Or if you look at some of the countries of our region, we don't have, we all have products. When, for example, masala chai is an Indian product, but has it been able to conquer the world? I suppose the fact that Starbucks now offers chai even in America is the closest thing I have to an answer for you. But we should. Air India was well on the way to being a world-leading brand, but then after nationalization, it completely went down the tubes. We'll have to see. We can produce it. I just don't believe that we have tried hard enough and that the right attempts have been made. But the answer is because we don't actually have an international market in mind. We've got the security of the largest domestic market. So we focus on that, and we do things that are good enough for India, but may not necessarily seize the imagination of the world.